Hey everyone, Rachel here, and today I wanted to do a video talking about inclusivity and what it means when we talk about fit. Inclusivity is a term used, it seems like all the time these days, with good reason. I think it's a really nice thing to try to aim for and a nice thing to talk about, although sometimes I do wonder um, how truthful it is when people use that term. But as a pattern maker personally, inclusivity is always the thing that I'm thinking about. And this is what I mean by that. When I work on a garment, I'm always thinking, first off, who is this for? And how can I make them feel like the best version of themselves in it? How can I make them feel empowered and enabled and beautiful and special and thought about doing my job? So I really want a person, when they buy something that I worked on, I want them to put it on and feel like, oh, look at this really nice detail, or look at the way it actually fits me being a petite person, or, et cetera. I want them to feel that sense of care. I hope they feel it. I don't know if people always feel it, but I do think that sometimes when you have that rare special opportunity, when you put on a garment that just fits you just right, and it's the perfect color and it's the perfect style, and you just love everything about it, it can make you feel that like warm, fuzzy feeling inside. And that's really what I want. And so I'm always thinking about who the potential customer is and how to meet their needs. And by who the potential customer is, I mean, it can be a variety of people, right? I don't just mean the base size. I don't just mean the size small or medium that I'm working on, but I also try to think about every size in the range. So the bottom of the range to the top of the range, and also anyone in between. Like, well, this style doesn't have petite offerings, so what is it going to be like for a petite person? Or how are they going to take care of it? How are they going to wash it? Those are the things that I think really motivate me to keep doing my job. And I think it's a reason why I want to talk about inclusivity when it comes to fit, because I think all these discussions about being inclusive, I don't really hear a lot of companies involving pattern makers or experts on fit. And I think that fit is just so crucial when we talk about inclusivity, right? I mean, how can you make clothing for people who are a 4X or people who are transitioning from a man to a woman if you're not thinking about fit? Because if it doesn't fit them, then it's totally useless. You can make a capsule collection, and maybe it will sell to a few people, and maybe it'll make headlines, in some style magazine, but it's not going to do anyone the good that you really wanted it to do, because those people are going to be missed by that product. So when we talk about inclusivity with fit, I'm just going to say three things that I like to think about. And these are the three things: fit, style, and function. So when I say fit, of course, I mean the physicalities of getting it on and off your body, and the basic geometry of it fitting you. So can you put it on? Does it fit over your hips? Does it fit over your shoulders? Does it fit over your hair? And that kind of basic thing. So the basics of fit might be, does it go up to a size 4X or a size 000? Does it come in offerings for petite? Does it come in offerings for tall? So that kind of falls under that fit inclusivity bucket. And then style inclusivity, I think, is more about providing people of different sizes the styles that they want. So there are some men who want to wear women's styles, and there are some women who want to wear men's styles. And it doesn't mean that those people are, I actually think it's much more common than we think it is, that men and women shop across the aisle. And I feel like we need to think about those people as well, because when they're shopping across the aisle, it might be because they're missing what they really need and value in what's offered for them. And so they're making a sacrifice, because if you are a woman and you identify as a woman, but you have to buy a man's clothing in order to get the thing that you want, like, for instance, a functional pocket, then you're sacrificing some amount of fit, right? Because men's clothing is not really meant to fit women's bodies. And so depending on the shapes of your body, you might not be able to get something that fits you the right way. So you have to make that sacrifice. And, that's kind of a bummer. So I think that's what I mean by the style. And inclusivity, when it comes to function, fall back on that pockets again, we see a great divide. When you look at women's clothing compared to men's clothing, women's clothing tends to be much less functional than men's clothing. And of course, this is a lot about how we view women and what their primary role is, which is, even though I think we're trying to change things for the better, when you think about it, traditionally, women are highly valued based on how they look. And they're told at a young age that their value is based on how beautiful they are. And also how much they can contribute to the people around them. So they're constantly, not only do they have to look beautiful, they have to fulfill the needs of the people around them. So often we give women things that are not super functional, like tight dresses and lightweight fabrics that are not really comfortable, that might get a snag in them. They have to wear pantyhose, etc. Shoes that make us walk weird or we can't run, and then we have to carry purses because we don't have pockets to put our stuff in. So many levels when it comes to fit and how to be inclusive. So let's talk about why people shop across the aisle, and I think this is important to talk about when we talk about inclusivity. So I hear a lot of brands and sort of just people in the ether talk about the idea of unisex. And when you think about unisex, often we're kind of thinking about this very androgynous outfit that is sort of not feminine or masculine and really could fit, or from a styling perspective, has neither feminine or masculine markers, right? So a great example of this is the Star Trek outfits, well, except for her. And the Star Trek outfits, you can see between a man and one woman. Well, Star Trek, even though we're in the future, we're still not like totally equitable. But the one woman who gets to be on Star Trek, she at least gets the exact same style. And I do have to give it to them. Her pants, from here, I can't tell that they're any tighter than the men's. I'm sure they are. But even the top looks about the same amount of roominess. So that's pretty cool that she's wearing a garment that in style, the fit aesthetic of that garment is fairly similar to the man's. The big difference I see is that it looks like her fabric is much more drapey. It looks like she's wearing some sort of viscose knit or something, or like a lycra. And they have like this stiffer fabric. Like maybe I don't know if we had scuba fabric then, but it looks kind of like a scuba fabric drape, if that makes sense. So that is the one big difference that you're seeing here between the masculine presenting garment and the feminine presenting garment. Yet again, we are making women wear less heavy, lightweight fabrics, which are, depending on the weather and depending on the use, generally less functional, right? And also more body conscious. So we're getting to see more of her because, of course, that is what women are valued for, is seeing all of their bodies as much as possible all the time. So why would women ever want to shop not in women's clothing, right? So let's talk about that. Of course, I am a woman who identifies as a woman and I'm straight. So I know that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but all I can do is share my own perspective and the perspective of people I know to start a discussion about why people shop across aisles. So as a woman, one thing I know that a lot of women do when they shop across aisles, as I just said, is they shop men's pants because of pockets. And of course, the problem is that often they don't really fit women as well, especially if that woman who is shopping for men's products has more shape to her body. It could also be that this woman just likes the look of men's clothing. So this brand, Kieran Finch, they call themselves androgynous. I would say it's probably slightly masculine presenting, traditionally masculine presenting clothing that is made to fit feminine shaped body. So this is pretty nice because I think if you're a woman and you like wearing men's clothing, as many do, for a lot of reasons, and I will kind of dig into that. The problem is that men's clothing is not made for us, so often it doesn't really fit us in the hip area or the waist. Shirts are too big, they fall off our shoulders. There's a lot of things wrong with trying to fit yourself into men's clothing unless you just happen to have the build that makes it easy for you to go across the aisle. So it's pretty cool that this brand is offering that, and I'm really excited that we're starting to see more and more of this. But yeah, what makes a woman want to wear a men's style jacket or a men's style shirt? I think the traditional response is often sexuality, and I really hate that response because I think that there's three things that we can think about when we think about the way people dress. So we can think about how they identify, right? So in my case, I identify as a woman. We can think about how they, or I'm sorry, yeah, we can think about the gender they were assigned at birth. So I was assigned a woman. I also identify as a woman. So I'm working with women's body shapes, and I also identify as a woman. So okay, now the third thing, I'm straight. So now you're going to sort of put me in this bucket like, oh, here's a straight woman who identifies as a woman. She probably wants to wear pink frilly things that show off her body. And when she works out, she's going to wear these pants that are basically see-through. And she's going to have no function. And so she has to rely on someone else to carry her keys and her wallet. I hate that. So I think this is a great example of why I don't think sexuality has anything to do with it necessarily. You can have a person who was assigned woman at birth, who identifies as a woman, but still prefers to shop more masculine clothing, whether or not their sexuality is straight or gay. It doesn't really matter. Lots of women I know, me, myself, I like wearing things that are less revealing. So I often wear sort of button-up shirts, kind of like men's style button-up shirts with a sweater over top. I do wear a lot of feminine clothing too, like pleated skirts and long sweaters, but I really don't like tight clothing. And the reason I don't like tight clothing is I'm like really don't want to, and I'm not saying this as a negative thing towards anyone who does do this, but I really am aware of being displayed kind of as a sexual object. And I think a lot of women's clothing is made to display us in that way. And, of course I want to feel beautiful, but I think there are different kinds of beautiful, and everybody has their own definition of beautiful. And I don't think beautiful has to be a short skirt or a tight garment. I think beauty can be in a lot of different things, and ultimately, beauty is what makes you feel really good and feel like the best reflection of yourself, right? So personally, I actually do shop a lot of menswear clothing. I would say on the whole, I probably present more feminine though, because I still curl my hair and I like wearing makeup and I like shiny things. But I don't like high heels. I do wear a lot of skirts, but I tend to wear, for a while I was really into wearing like men's style shoes. Like I used to wear more like driving mocks a lot, sort of moved out of that phase of my life. But yeah, for a long time I was really into wearing men's kind of style items. And a lot of that was about not wanting to be seen as a sexual object, wanting to be taken seriously in a workplace, and not to be seen kind of as something to be disregarded. So I think a lot of women are like me, and don't necessarily want to be seen in that way. And so that's maybe one of very many reasons why a woman might shop in or might shop in the men's department or desire clothing that is not specifically feminine or traditionally feminine, if that makes sense. So I love that they're doing this. This is really great. But yes, I wouldn't call this androgynous. I would actually call this kind of like masculine presenting. But that's fine, right? So that's one reason women, for example, like me, might shop across aisles. I also know of men who shop women's clothing, and it can be related or not related to how they present. So, some men, even though they identify as a man and they were assigned male at birth, they might still like wearing women's clothing for a variety of different reasons. And but the only problem is depending on their build, depending on their size, they might not be able to fit into women's clothing. So those are people who are also being missed by the apparel market. Those people who kind of like those more feminine styles, who want to wear a dress, who want to wear something with sequins, or maybe they just want to wear a t-shirt that's in pink. I actually recently had a friend who he literally just wanted a pink shirt, and he could not find a pink shirt for men. I'm sure there's lots out there, but it was just like he wanted the specific color, and they had that specific color, but only for women. And he tried to wear it, and it just like didn't fit him because it was way too small on the shoulders, and he's a pretty built up guy. And I think another great example of like clothing fit just because the style presents as feminine or the color presents as feminine doesn't mean that it has to be only accessible for women or men, for people who identify as women or men. So those things can be really separated. The same goes for people who are non-binary. So people I know who are non-binary, some of them go by they, or some of them go by they, he, or they, she. And those people might present more masculine in the way they dress or more feminine. So I know both sides of it, where even though they identify as a they still have a slight lean when it comes to the styles that they prefer. So they maybe prefer a more feminine look or a more masculine look. So I think to say that someone who is non-binary definitely wants androgynous clothing that has no sort of style gender to it, is kind of missing the mark. There's lots of people who exist somewhere in an ether between who are, who are neither one thing or another. And I think that's the whole point of this discussion, right? Is that gender is non-binary, right? It's not linear. It's not like you are one thing or the other thing. And there is no there's no sort of checklist of okay, well, you're a straight woman, so you must like pink things, or you're a straight man who identifies as a man, so you must like blue checkered shirts. There is no straightforward answer to those questions. And so I think when it comes to providing inclusive items for a wide variety of people, it's kind of about dividing the physicality of fit, that very first principle of just plain the physicality and geometry of fit, of being able to physically put it on, of it fitting your shoulders, fitting your neckline, fitting your waist, and then from the style. So the style, so let's say the fit might be, let's say you might have a style that is a dress, and so it's more feminine leaning, feminine presenting, but the fit of it could either fit a male type body or a female type body, or it could fit something in between. And when we think about fit, of course, fit is related to style, right? So sometimes things are really boxy, and often we put unisex in that boxy zone. So there's more feminine fit, which is tighter and hugs curves and shows a waistline. And then there's the masculine fit, which maybe shows shoulders. It's not as tight in the waist, and and it's usually out of thicker fabrics. So. And then there's sort of this in between, and when you see unisex lines, they're often like this. I'm just going to use that in quotes because often unisex lines are sort of boxy. They don't have traditional details like button-down collars or ties. Missing traditional gender details. And of course, for a person who is, let's say, a person who is was labeled as female from birth and then identifies as a man and wants to wear, but let's say they want to wear androgynous clothing, but they're very curvy, or I used androgynous, but let's say unisex clothing, that person, if they're very curvy, boxy clothing maybe doesn't work on them. Often boxy clothing can be very hard to work on people who are curvy, who have shapes, and it really depends on the style. And so I feel like we just kind of have to separate all of these things from the physicality of fit, the physicality or the design details, and also the function. So giving function to whatever the fit is or whatever the style is. If it's a dress, can it still be functional? Can it still have pockets? Can it be made of fabrics that are functional and allow us to have pockets that are useful? So I think that we've been so ingrained to think, when we think of women's clothing, we think of a certain fit automatically of waistlines and bust darts and all of these things that we sort of like can't quite separate all of these items out. And I think that we have to separate them out if we're really going to be able to include everyone in the equation. So let's talk about a few pain points, and and I think this sort of relates up here. So I discussed people who maybe have different gender preferences when it comes to their clothing, and also functionality. So like women who buy men's clothing because of the function of pockets, or because they don't want to wear sexualized clothing in a workplace or just in their everyday life. But there's also other things, like for example, that are sort of embedded into the way we size clothing today, and the way we and what we give people, which is, so right now when we look at men's clothing, very rarely do you see sizes smaller than extra small. So small is the smallest size. Sometimes you'll see an extra small. I know Express carries an extra small, but yeah, a lot of men's clothing does not carry extra small, and on the whole, I would say it's generally made to be larger. But as we know, men are not always larger than women. And then, to boot, if we really want to make things accessible to people of different shapes and sizes, maybe men's clothing can go smaller, right? Maybe there are people who identify as a woman who want to wear men's clothing, or people who identify as non-binary who want to wear men's clothing, but they're too small for it. And there's people who identify as a man and or who were assigned man from birth, identified as man, want to wear men's clothing, but they just can't find the right size. And that's why you see some small men's clothing lines that are made for petite men. But there's certainly not a lot of options for men who are basically under 5'9". And to be honest, like that's a lot of men. A lot of men are smaller than a size small, and we really don't pay them any service. Usually when we talk about size inclusivity, I feel like we're always talking about women. We're always talking about non-binary people, and we're always talking about plus size. But very rarely, I feel like, are we talking about men. And I know it's because often we don't think of men as being, a marginalized part of society. But I do actually think that petite men are kind of marginalized in our society. And to boot, we don't give them options of clothing to wear. So, I don't even think a man who's under 5'9" is really all that petite, but it just is really unfortunate that we sort of force them into wearing baggy clothes and jeans that drag on the floor because we don't want to live in a world where men, aren't all super tall. Like that's pretty crappy. So men's clothing is definitely one of the pain points. Another one, as I just said, is plus size apparel. I'd love to start using a different word for plus size. And I'm going to think of one. If any of you have a good term that you like to use, I'd really like to use it, because one thing I want to transition into is not using like small, medium, large as distinguishing factors, but using numbers. So the nice thing about numbers is they aren't judging. Like plus size is saying like, oh, you're bigger than. But if we can just use numbers that don't have any meaning other than a number, like your waist is this, your waist is 44 and your hips are 57. That's not a judgment. It's just measurements. And so that's what I want to kind of move towards, but I haven't figured out how to generalize that statement yet. But anyway, so plus size apparel, definitely a place where we're missing. You are seeing more brands who are offering plus size apparel, but one of the problems with it is I think it's often just a grade up, meaning that they just sort of tag on these extra sizes and they're not necessarily fitting them and looking at them and understanding how to actually fit a person. So I don't really know that market is being served right now. But if you are someone who shops 1X to 4X and you have some feedback to give or brands you love, I would definitely love to hear from you. Please leave me a comment below. And then I think the last pain point, which I've been talking about, is the ability to shop across gendered styles. So I think what I'm hoping for the future is a world when a style can just be a style. When you can shop for this jacket and you can say, I love this jacket. It's a beautiful color. It looks like it's well made. I love the width of the lapels. Everything about this jacket is what I want. So now I just need to know what size I am. So I'm a size 36 chest. So I'm going to buy the size 36. And then I can check that, let's say maybe instead of calling it the men's version or the women's version, we can just call it something like curvy type body or a straight body, because certainly there are women who even though they were assigned women from birth, identify as a woman, they maybe are not very curvy people, and maybe something that has darts and that has a lot of waist shaping is not the fit style that they prefer. So I think separating them out from the measurements, from the fit, from the styling, allows people to find the thing that they want. So I could say, hey, I want this in green, and I want it for someone who is curvy. And then maybe you can give a degree of curviness. Like maybe my hip to waist to bust, maybe my hip to waist ratio is 11 inches. That's kind of curvy, but it's not super curvy. Maybe it's 20 inches. That's very curvy. So maybe there's levels of curves and depending on the garment, this one you need to think about sort of all three: your hip, your waist, and your bust. So I feel like it's sort of like a flow chart of choosing, the style and then the fit type. The style and then the size and then the fit type, so that it can be accessible to anyone. So a man could buy this as well, and they could choose the straight version. And so that's what I'm hoping for in the future. I think the thing that I really don't love, I found this article about 10 androgynous and gender inclusive brands to shop now. The thing that I don't love about these brands, I think it's great, and I love that they're providing options for people and that they're showing people who don't normally get shown in advertisements and in imagery. There's so much power to that, and they're also offering styles that are just not in other places in the market. But when you look at things, and I'll just show you this, there's not a lot of size option. So maybe that's fine. This is kind of a big dress. There's not a lot of shape to it. And I think this is part of where it's designed to be pretty much accessible to people of a variety of body shapes. But I would say one thing that's missing is the armhole. Someone who maybe has a more traditionally masculine build, where they have a bigger shoulder and arm and built up sort of lat muscles, so they have that makes their arm side bigger, and it means that an armhole might not fit them. So this might not really work on someone who is kind of more of a buff, kind of more masculine build. No matter how they identify, this probably won't fit them. So I feel like that's kind of a miss. I think it's, the reality is that it's really hard to make something that pleases everyone. And so I think the thing, especially when it comes to a small brand, is you just have to have a strong brand identity. Say, this is the thing that we offer. And we offer fun clothes in bright colors. And we show it to you in a variety of people and body types. And, however you want to wear it and make yourself feel beautiful is the way we want you to wear it. Well, that's really interesting. But I do think that calling things medium, small, large, I would love to see. I know that a lot of unisex brands and capsule collections use alpha sizing. I would love to see brands kind of get away from this, because I feel like that's still falling into somewhat of a gendered approach. And the reason I say that is because what we consider a small in women is different than what we consider a small in men. I just don't think that that what you, I feel like there's some inherent engendered stereotypes in these alpha sizes. And so I think by getting away from them, we would do everybody a favor. And we could just call things by their measurements. This is a size 36 or something. I would say the one thing that is nice about it is for people who are not super knowledgeable about fits, if you know that you usually wear a medium-ish or a large-ish, this is nice. It keeps it simple. And not everybody knows what their bust measures. So in that way, I do like small, medium, large because it's simple. And for things that are, stretchy and fairly unstructured, you can kind of get away with that simplicity. With a dress that's kind of a trapeze dress like this, maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, I think it might matter in your arms, but, you probably have some idea of what works on you, or maybe you go try it on. But I do feel like I do wish there was a nice alternative to that, something that seems simple but was also not kind of inherently gendered and judgmental, because by calling something small or medium or, we're automatically categorizing something as like, okay, you're in the middle of normal and you're outside of normal and you're below normal. I don't love that, and I wish we could find a way around that. That might take a long time to get to, but so I hope that explains some of my thoughts about inclusivity when it comes to apparel today, and what I think is working and what isn't working and what I'm hoping to see in the future. Of course, this is coming from just my perspective and my experience and the people that I know and I talk to. So I don't expect this to be conclusive or answer any specific questions, but I did want to do it because I wanted to get the ball rolling and start the conversation and start talking about fit in a more meaningful way, because I do see a lot of other YouTubers talk about inclusivity when it comes to plus size apparel, when it comes to gender neutrality in clothing, and I think that I think it's great, and but I also think that often fit is kind of left off the list, and I think part of that is just like, how would you know to talk about something? Fit is so complicated. So it definitely is a hard topic to dig into. And that's why I wanted to share my thoughts from someone who's been working on fit for a long time now. And hopefully I'll hear from some of you and what are your pain points when you shop? What do you wish was out there for you? How do you think things have improved in the last 20 years? Certainly since I was a teenager, I think there's way more selection for women to dress in a way that isn't necessarily over-sexualized. In the 2000s, actually, maybe I closed it. If anyone remembers the 2000s style, let's hear it. 2000s fashion women's. We all had to wear super low-rise pants and really tight things and show off our stomachs. I hated clothes in that era. I was so uncomfortable in all of these items, and I felt like there weren't a lot of options for me. It was very limiting. And I felt like clothing was very much like, all right, women, you're supposed to dress like your body is what defines you. And the only way you can wear something that isn't hypersexualized is if you wear men's clothes, which has its own connotations at the time. So it just, it felt like a no-win situation. And I definitely feel like we've made progress going forward. I don't feel like the styles are quite so limiting. I feel like I could wear this as a woman who identifies as a woman who's straight, and it wouldn't be weird. You know what I mean? I feel like we're in a space where people can kind of wear what they want, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a signifier of something. Or I hope that we are there. But I'm sure it's not all, all rainbows and hearts, but yeah, I do at least see progress, and I'm hopeful and excited and anxious to see what the future brings. Okay. Well, thanks for joining me today. I hope to see you in my next video. Yeah, if you have any questions, leave them below. Thanks.